Just to give a little background on SMA or spinal muscular atrophy, it's a genetic neuromuscular disease that primarily affects children. And it's caused by a mutation or defect in the survival of motor neuron 1 gene, SMN1 gene. And it's one of the leading rare diseases, or it was the leading cause of death in young children. And in the most severe form, children present symptoms by 6 months of age, and many unfortunately pass away by 2 years of age. And in milder forms, it's primarily a motor disorder. Even though this gene is expressed in all cells of the body, it seems to primarily affect the motor neurons in the spinal cord the most. And so there results in muscle atrophy, and children are unable to sit or walk or even stand. And in the last 5 years, we've been fortunate that we actually have developed effective therapies, and they're just not symptomatic treatments, but they're actually therapeutics that get at the root cause of the disease. So primarily the SMN1 gene that is missing or mutated in the patients. And so almost 5 years ago, so 5 years ago in December, the first drug for SMA was approved, and that was Spinraza, and that was developed by Ionis and Biogen. It's a drug that actually acts on a backup gene. So there's a backup gene in humans called SMN2, and this gene makes less of the protein that's essential for the function of, like I said, all cells, but primarily motor neurons in the spinal cord. And so Spinraza, which unfortunately had to be injected directly into the fluid of the spinal cord, so into the CSF and intrathecally. So that drug actually allowed SMN2, the backup gene, to make more full-length protein. And about 2 years ago, the second therapeutic, which was a gene therapy, was approved, and that was developed by Avexis. And in that case, the missing gene itself, SMN1, was replaced. And again, that actually really primarily had to be injected into the spinal cord. And so both these initial two therapies really were directed primarily at the motor neurons that were causing the motor deficits that you see in the disease. So the third drug, that is an oral medication. So it functions in the same way as the first drug. It really affects the backup gene SMN2 and allows more functional protein to be made. So I would say that with those three drugs, the different drugs are good and bad for various patients. Obviously, the physician will determine what's best for a particular patient. But I think that's really changed the landscape of SMA. Here, it's one of the, I used to work in neurological diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and people have been working on those in those areas for decades, but there really haven't been effective drugs. Whereas in SMA, we now have three pretty effective drugs. And so I think the focus has now changed to, now that we've stopped the decline function and we're plateaued and stabilized the patient, are there ways to actually increase function? And so the community's kind of turned to focusing on muscle, since motor neurons do project to muscle and muscles atrophy or degenerate in this disease. So we really tried to look at drugs that directly affect muscle, so that to build up muscle. And I guess the third area that we're really looking at in the last year or so, I think, as a community, are really drugs that are regenerative medicine. So trying to rebuild the nervous system or muscle